we start where the show ended yesterday and continues through the day, and that's with Alabama hoops, with Coach Nate Oats and his initial response to the information that came out that Alabama knew about. The information that came out, though, in the preliminary hearing for the shooting that took place on January the 15th involving a now former player, Crimson Tide, Darius Miles, and another person, that a shooting that killed a 23-year-old single mom, and top player in the country, top player for the top team, right now projected to be the number one seed in the Crimson Tide, Brandon Miller, brought the gun to the scene, which was used in that killing, according to law enforcement in Tuscaloosa. Nate Oats, Chad, had a very, an awful response to it, given the fact he's known about it since January 15th. And since then, it's been the last 24 hours, a bunch of discussion and statements galore.
Yeah, and I think we can play that, Nate Oats, with the initial statement, right? Because this is why I want for people to hear it and see it, because when we reacted to it yesterday, it was in a press conference where I had not had a chance to hear it or see it. And when I saw it, it was exactly the way it read in print. Exactly the same way I read in print, right? When I read it in print, I thought, this sounds like someone who's trying to be dismissive, almost irritated he's being asked a question, and says a lot of really dumb things. And then I went back and watched it, and it was exactly as I thought.
Here is the initial response from yesterday from Alabama coach Nate Oats.
There is a situation, just how comfortable were you with his proximity to that, and also if there's any NBA scouts who might be inquiring, what would you say to them about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've known the situation since we've been fully cooperating with law enforcement the entire time. I mean, the whole situation's sad. I mean, you just think of it, we team close practice with a prayer for the situation today. Again, knowing that we had this trial today, I mean, you think of Jamia and her family and Kane, really think about her son Kane that was left behind. So it's sad. We knew about that. I mean, can't control everything anybody does outside of practice. Nobody knew that was going to happen. College kids are out. Brandon hasn't been in any type of trouble, nor is he in any type of trouble on this case. Like, the wrong spot at the wrong time. So we'll address it when I'm sure NBA scouts will ask. They do their homework. But yeah, I think the article that it came out and also stated Brandon's been interviewed. He's, they're comfortable with everything that happened there.
That is a total wrong answer for wrong place, wrong time.
Not only wrong place, wrong time, guys are going to go out. We didn't know that was going to happen. No one knew that was going to happen. And I keep coming back to, so many people want to respond and defend the fact that, well, Brandon Miller's not being charged with the crime, so what is Alabama supposed to do? Athletes are suspended all the time and face discipline for non-criminal related activities. You don't have to be charged with a crime or go to jail to face a suspension or to be kicked off a team. There are things that happen all the time that don't go to the courts that guys are disciplined over. This would obviously be one of them. We didn't know it was going to happen. What would you think, you out there listening, watching right now, if one of your buddies sent you a text saying, bring me my piece at 1:35 a.m. when he had been out at a bar drinking? Oh, no problem. Yeah, I'll bring it right away. I'm sure that, he just wants to go skeet shooting right now. Of course there's something going on. This is not some little kid. This is a guy who knows something was up, and he supplied the gun. It wasn't his gun. He had the gun for whatever reason in his car, in his apartment, whatever. He had another guy's gun. He brought him his gun. But wouldn't you ask a lot of questions? Wouldn't you think twice about doing that? Wouldn't you feel terrible if that gun was then used to murder a young mother? There are so many questions that they cannot answer in a logical way right now at Alabama. That's really baffling to me right now, Hutton. I have never seen a more morally bankrupt story than what we've seen with Jermaine Burton and now this at the University of Alabama. Someone is asleep at the wheel, and they have sold out to, if we're winning, we don't care, and we don't care what people think about it. And I think there's way too many people carrying their water locally in that state. I think there's way too many people nationally carrying their water. Now, I did hear ESPN last night, Jimmy Dykes during the Tennessee A&M game, say, I hope there's a better statement than that, because that was awful from Nate Oats about what he said about the whole situation. So good for him for speaking out about Nate Oats. But I continue to go back to the fact that this guy's just going to play. Alabama's just going to be the number 1 seed in the NCAA tourney, and they're going to rock and roll right along. And meanwhile, a young woman was murdered in connection to one of their players, and the star player scoring all the points for Alabama provided that person with the gun. And that does not sit well with me. It wouldn't sit well with me if I'm an Alabama fan or alumni. Doesn't sit well with me as a fan of college sports. I do not get how there's not more heat on Alabama to suspend him or to kick him off the team.
Well,
I don't get it.
I think the vast majority of the conversation is happening today and not yesterday when all this was being discussed here. And, of course, with what we saw from the Alabama and Mid-South area and SEC coverage. I also say, look, they've been playing him. Nate Oats said to begin that answer that they've known about this. That can go back to January 15th when this shooting occurred. And no matter what, the fact that you're involved in this would make me, as if I'm a coach, if I'm an administrator, if I'm a school president, whatever it might be, you can't just say, you know what, wrong place, wrong time. Given the fact that for over a month, you've known that this took place, and law enforcement, no, they didn't bring charges. They said they weren't bringing charges yesterday as well in the answer. But, Chad, this is a mushroom cloud that's just starting as Alabama gets set for tournament play. And, by the way, they play tonight. I made a call earlier just to ask someone who would be relevant to the situation there in Tuscaloosa if, in fact, he's playing regardless of the coverage of this. And as of right now, indications are, yeah, he's in the lineup. But he's been in the lineup since January 16th when they played in Nashville, right, against the Commodores. Just right after this took place.
The next day.
Yeah, and I take that
That's when he talked about talking to Ray Lewis, by the way.
Right, yeah. And
it was after that game.
I take this to mean, yeah, he's playing. And apparently he tried to clarify his statement today. Here's Alabama coach Nate Oats in the statement today with the hollow apology. Quote, I thought it was important for me to clarify the unfortunate remarks I made earlier. This entire time, I've tried to be thoughtful in my words relative to the tragic incident, and my statements came across poorly. We were informed by law enforcement of other student athletes being in the vicinity, and law enforcement has repeatedly told us that no other student athletes were suspects. They were witnesses only. Our understanding is that they have been fully truthful and cooperative. In no way did I intend to downplay the seriousness of this situation or the tragedy of that night. My prayers continue to go out to Jamia Harris's family. I read this and I think this goes back to his initial statement, which was released, where he said, we're going to hop on a bus, we're traveling to Nashville, we've talked with the team. But he also gave out his thoughts and prayers to the victim's family. And I don't know how a month later you get a question like that and you're answering it that way, wrong place, wrong time, and you're referencing whatever the question was about NBA scouts and what they might think. You got to step back and just say, I honestly don't care right now. That's got to be the answer. And it wasn't. Instead, we have headlines today, over a month later, Miller connected to fatal shooting. Brandon Miller could have stopped tragedy. Just some of the Google searches you can make right now on what's going on at Alabama, and they tip off tonight against South Carolina.
Well, this is what happens when you prioritize winning above absolutely everything. And that, to me, is what the University of Alabama is right now. They've leveraged their soul against success on the field or on the court by not doing anything, because this is not just Nate Oats. There are bosses ahead of Nate Oats that could do this. There's Greg Sankey, who could come in and suspend him from the SEC. Greg Sankey's not going to do anything because Greg Sankey's right down the road in Birmingham, and they never do anything when it involves Alabama. It's ridiculous that not one adult. I said this about to a much lesser degree with Jermaine Burton and Nick Saban. The guy is able to do whatever he wants in his fiefdom. That's fine when it comes to the program, but when things are seen on video, or now you have a young woman murdered in the streets, and it was an Alabama player involved, multiple Alabama players involved, we now learn. I mean, kicking Darius Miles off the team was a no-brainer because the guy, he's without bond right now in a murder case. Of course he's going to get kicked off the team. Do the right thing and kick Brandon Miller off the team too. And people want to come out and say, why are you going to ruin the kid's life? Why do you want to ruin lives over this? Someone was murdered. And I'm not trying to ruin his life. I'm not saying he should go to jail. If the Alabama laws are what they are, I don't want Brandon Miller to go to prison over this. I also don't want him to get the benefit of one shining moment. I don't want to see his face during the montage at the end of the tournament when Alabama's cutting down the nets. This is a stain and a cloud that will follow this program and follow Nate Oats forever. And by God, I hope that's the case if they don't do anything about this. I, for one, will be rooting like hell against Alabama. And it has nothing to do with a team affiliation of my own. It has to do with the fact they have done nothing. If they suspended this kid, if they handled this better, if he was kicked off the team, I'd have no problem with Alabama having success moving forward. The rest of America should be rooting against Alabama in this tournament and moving forward. And I understand sports aren't the most important thing here. I feel like I'm one of the few people that understand that right now when I look at what Alabama's doing with all this. It's sickening what's going on. It really is. I don't get it. I'm not going to go as far as our colleague Clay Travis, our fearless leader, who we'll have on later, who is demanding Alabama fire Nate Oats over this. I'm not saying that much. I will say this, though. This is something that will never go away, right? There are things that coaches have gotten in trouble with over the years that it still follows them around, even if they have tons of success after that fact. The fact that one of your players was involved in a murder and your star player, who's a one and done, aided and abetted by supplying that person their gun the night of the murder and was around when it happened, this will not go away no matter how many games you win. Now, if you win, great. Clearly, Alabama fans won't care. They'll be excited. They'll be happy. But it's never going to go away.
Well,
this is going to be the byline of Nate Oats' career. And if they don't do so, it may be the byline of Brandon Miller's career too.
Well, clearly not. Or even the contract extension for Nate Oats.
Which happened on February 3rd?
Yeah, 2 weeks after, roughly. Contract extension, roughly, $4 million annually to keep him in Tuscaloosa. Now, aided and abetted, if that were the case, he would be charged with something, and he's not. And that's what they're leaning on.
Well, here's what they're leaning on. So, and I've done a little bit of research. I am no lawyer, but I've done research on the Alabama statute. I think the reporter we had on yesterday said the same thing. They have to prove full knowledge that that gun was going to be used to murder someone, right? So there's no way to prove that unless there's a text message saying, hey, bring me this gun. I'm going to kill this person right now. And he responded to the text message, okay, I'm bringing it right away. So that didn't happen. But I just go back to common sense. If anyone you know asks for a gun at 1:35 a.m. when they've been at a bar all night, you know something bad is likely to happen. So you don't just mindlessly bring them the gun. Brandon Miller is guilty of that, of the very least. He didn't pull the trigger. He didn't kill the girl. All these things. I'm not saying he should be in jail. The law is the law. But everyone knows something's going to happen. He should not have the privilege of playing for Alabama right now.
Well, here's what
that should be the case.
Here's what we need to hear next. We need to hear why everybody there, law enforcement, president, AD, head coach, teammates, why everyone's okay with Brandon Miller's side of this as to why he was wrong place, wrong time. You have to give detail to that now that you've been sitting on for 6 weeks. That's the next step.
Yeah.
Because if you're willing to say, you know what, we believe him, he's a good kid, he had nothing to do with this, wrong place, wrong time. You have to provide details that clarify and make sure that everyone's on the up and up with why he's on the court and not on the bench, at the least. And they've yet to do that. Maybe he does it post-game. But look, Chad, he's from right here in Middle Tennessee.
Yep.
And great player by all accounts.
I think his mother's a police officer.
No,
fact.
that's Darius Miles' mother.
Oh, Darius Miles. Sorry.
Yeah, Darius Miles' mother, who Darius is one of the two. Miles is the one that texted Miller to bring the gun that then gave it to Davis, who admits to being the guy who pulled the trigger. I've got to hear their side of it. For whatever reason, they're dumb enough not to give it to us. And they continue to say, we've known about this. Tell us what you know then. Because if law enforcement's cool with it and Alabama is, everyone deserves to hear that side while everyone speculates as to why or why not he shouldn't be on the floor, including Greg Sankey. Greg Sankey needs to explain why he's allowing him to take the floor tonight.
And I'm watching, like what happened at Michigan State, which is terrible, right? And
yeah,
you see the emotions of Tom Izzo and all the players and everything else, the women's basketball team playing over the weekend and emotions involved with that. And I just keep thinking back to, man, this all happened and it got out, and a day later, dude's playing right here in Nashville at Memorial Gym like it's no problem. That whole team, they go out there and win a game. That does not sit well with me. When you look at all this, Nate Oats in his comment, he seemed annoyed to have to talk about it yesterday. There is a clear lack of priority going on right now with Alabama. And some may argue, well, hey, that's led to them being the number 1 overall seed. Well, great. That is the case. But there's also a lot more going on that's going to follow that program around, and I believe Nate Oats' career for a long time. And the fact that what you're saying, Hutton, is spot on. They need to talk about this. They need to clarify some things. They won't. Brandon Miller's never going to be made available to the media. They don't have to. He's not going to talk to anyone. So here's what I hope happens. I've never one to hope that like some incident happens or people are throwing things or there's violence of any kind. They should be verbally harassed everywhere they go from here on out. That should happen to Alabama basketball. Don't know that it affects them one way or the other. Again, a girl was killed, and they went right out and played a basketball game and won shortly after. So I doubt some student sections, chanting some things at them is really going to affect them. But I kind of hope that happens now until Brandon Miller is suspended or until he's kicked off the team.
It is it's sad, not just this incident, but the way that it was described to me from someone else, Chad, that we're connected to in Tuscaloosa. It's like, look, if you go into places, you have no idea who's carrying and who's not now. And that's part of the issue here, is you send a text saying to bring the peace, and, mentally, if that's what everyone else has, you're bringing it back to your guy. That's sad that we're in that state now, where it's just assumed that you're going out and you're packing. Right?
It's very sad. And it's also very sad to see so many adults defend that and act like, hey, he doesn't know. Someone's asking for their property. Come on.
Well, but they're repeating the sentiment of the University of Alabama, which comes through Nate Oats in that statement.
Which is dumb. Why would Alabama treat everyone like idiots? Why? Ask yourself why. Because they want to win. And Brandon Miller is their chance at the national championship. Period. That's it. This has nothing to do with the victim. It has nothing to do with Darius Miles. It has nothing to do with anything else. All it has to do with the fact is they see an opportunity to win a natty for the first time in basketball, and they are going full steam ahead. Consequences be damned. Chance they will face be damned. Legacy of Nate Oats be damned. We will pay the man the money. We will continue to win at a big level, and we will play Brandon Miller because he's not being charged with a crime based on a technicality. Is there a code of conduct at the University of Alabama? I've seen plenty of instances at schools where things get held up because of a code of conduct for someone holding on to a weapon that doesn't belong to them, or an incident in a dorm,
Chad,
and they have to sit a couple games before the university looks through it, not just the police system. That never happened.
2017 Vanderbilt rape case. Boyd, I believe, the wide receiver.
Yep.
He knew about this. He did something. He had nothing to do with the actual events that took place, the horrific events that took place in the Vandenberg trial.
Yep.
He's kicked off the team. And he's one of their top players at the time at wide receiver.
For knowing. And I just,
knowing about it.
Another thing that I keep, hearing and seeing on social, and I'm seeing it right now, people interacting with us on social medias, every program would do this. You know, this is what every program do. I just do not believe that. Point to me an instance of a murder on a major college team and someone being implicated for providing the weapon or bringing it to them and then not facing a single one-game suspension,
but
2-game suspension,
and
anything.
What makes it peculiar is they're not telling us why they're siding with the player instead of the incident.
Because they know they can't give a good explanation. That's my hypothesis is they have no good explanation. So their answer is, we'll give you no explanation. We owe you nothing.
But law enforcement's also saying that he had no clue that what was going on. Again,
well, I think there's two different things to look at here, right? They're not
both
saying,
sides are saying they're okay with it.
They're not saying we believe Brandon Miller had no idea that something bad could happen. They're saying we can't prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that he knew a murder was about to be committed with that gun. Those are two different things. I'm pretty sure if we polled law enforcement, they'd say, really dumb of the kid not to ask more questions and just to bring the gun to the guy on demand. And he probably knew that something was up, that he was requesting a gun then, but we can't prove that he knew a murder was about to be committed. So I think those are two different things. They're not saying Brandon Miller's totally innocent and he didn't know anything. They're saying we can't prove enough beyond reasonable doubt to charge him with something that he absolutely knew that gun was going to be used in a murder.
Or even provide evidence to a judge that would then proceed to a grand jury to prove you have a case.
The other thing is, I'm sure that Brandon Miller has been cooperative with authorities.
Yeah.
As part of this.
And providing information to Nate Oats and the program.
Yeah.